Imagine waking up each month, opening your bank app, and feeling the same small victory you always feel. Pay in, bills paid, a little left over. Now imagine that same balance buying noticeably less a year from now. That feeling is not imagination. It's the slow, invisible shrinking of money. In the next 15 minutes, I'll explain why most people stay poor even when they work hard, how the system shifts value away from cash towards certain kinds of assets, and, most importantly, how to think about money so your choices create long-term financial freedom, rather than temporary comfort. This is education, not hype. Let's begin by naming the problem. Money loses purchasing power over time. Governments and central banks can and do increase the supply of new currency. When more bills and digital balances float around, each unit of money buys a bit less than before. This is inflation. Imagine money like seawater in a harbor. If the tide of fiat money rises steadily, the ships, that is, prices and wages, change how they float. If your pay doesn't rise at the same rate as prices, your purchasing power sinks. Why does this happen in real life? Because printing or creating new money is a policy tool used for many reasons: to stimulate growth, to finance government spending, to respond to crises. Those actions are decisions by institutions, not personal choices you can control. The effect on people is gradual but real. A saved cash balance becomes a smaller store of real value. Over time, that compounds. For example, modest inflation of 3% per year raises the overall price level by roughly a third in 10 years. That means a monthly budget of 100 units will need about 134 units in 10 years to buy the same things. If wages don't keep pace, the gap becomes financial stress. So why do most people misunderstand or ignore this? There are psychological forces at work. Present bias makes a warm meal today feel far more compelling than a dry statistic about inflation in a decade. Social proof pushes us to copy our peers' spending and saving habits. And complexity bias leads many to assume money basics are simple, so we store value in the obvious place, a bank account. But a bank balance is a nominal number. The real question is not, how many units of currency do I have, but how much real purchasing power do those units represent now and in the future? If you treat your pay as the end game, the thing you work for and then spend, you miss how value flows in the economy. Now let's talk about the second major concept: assets versus liabilities in real terms. In everyday language, an asset is anything that can produce value for you over time, or at least retain purchasing power. A liability is something that extracts money from you. The rich and financially literate habitually differentiate these not by how fancy something looks, but by how it behaves over time. The wealthy don't just work for money. They work to acquire assets that can either increase their cash flow, protect purchasing power, or both. Why does this matter practically? Because assets can act as a shield when currency value declines. If you hold everything in cash, inflation shrinks your real net worth. If you own assets that either rise with inflation or hold intrinsic value, you reduce that risk. That's not magic, it's simple cause and effect. When governments expand the money supply, real goods and scarce things, land, hard commodities, housing, certain collectibles or durable goods, typically become more expensive in currency terms. Being early or gradual in shifting part of your wealth into those real items can preserve value. Let's use a realistic example. Consider two people with the same job and income. Person A treats their salary as the whole story, save in a checking account, buy the latest devices, and occasionally splurge. Person B builds a small habit. Each month, they set aside a portion into durable, understandable stores of value, a small stake in a physical asset, or a diversified exposure to things that historically keep pace with or outpace inflation. 10 years later, both might have earned the same gross salary, but Person B's mix of holdings preserves and likely grows purchasing power, while Person A's cash has lost ground. Why do many dismiss this? People often conflate liquidity with safety. Cash is liquid and feels safe. You can spend it tomorrow. But safety in nominal terms is not safety in real terms. Our brains prioritize immediate access and visible comfort. The trouble is that short-term comfort compounds into long-term disadvantage. Another core idea is the difference between nominal gains and real gains. A raise of 5% sounds great. If prices rise 5% or more that year, the raise did not improve real purchasing power. Yet we celebrate nominal increases because numbers are easy to compare. The hard work is translating those numbers into what they buy. Now, we must look at the role of beliefs and narratives. There are powerful stories people tell themselves. If I just work harder, I'll get ahead. Or, I'll buy the investment when I can afford it. Or, buying a house is always smart. Some storylines are helpful. Others are comforting myths. For example, buying a depreciating car may feel like a smart purchase in social terms. It signals success. But financially, it's often a liability because it loses value and costs to maintain. Contrast that with an asset that either produces income or tends to hold real value. The mistake many make is not evaluating purchases on a long-term value flow basis. A useful analogy is the orchard versus the grocery store. Buying lunch at a grocery store satisfies hunger today. Planting and tending an orchard costs effort now, but yields fruit year after year. People often choose the grocery store option repeatedly because the orchard requires delayed benefit, patience, and maintenance. Behavioral traps make this worse. Instant gratification, marketing nudges, and social signals steer spending toward things that deliver immediate status while silently draining future options. Compound interest works in both directions. Compound savings and asset appreciation grow wealth. Compound spending and inflation erode it. So how do we practically think and act differently, without promises or shortcuts? First, change the question you ask yourself about money. Instead of, can I afford this? Add, will this increase or decrease my future purchasing power? That single change reframes decisions from short-term emotional wins to long-term financial design. Second, accept that absolute certainty does not exist. No, one can perfectly predict markets or policy. The practical path is to favor simplicity, diversification among understandable stores of value, and incremental action. Third, focus on cash flow and real purchasing power rather than balances alone. An asset that produces positive cash flow, even small income, can offset nominal erosion caused by inflation. A shelter or small rental property, for instance, when managed conservatively, can provide shelter plus income. But if you don't want hands-on property work, low-cost, understandable alternatives that align with your risk tolerance and knowledge are sensible. Fourth, be wary of narratives that push you into complexity you don't understand. If you can't explain why an investment should preserve value in simple terms, be cautious. There's nothing glamorous about saying, I don't fully understand this. It's honest and protective. Now let's address the final uncomfortable reality the source calls, the system is rigged. That phrase captures a structural truth. When the rules favor the creation of more currency, and when access to certain asset classes is easier for those with capital, inequality can widen. People with spare capital can buy assets as currency declines in value. People living paycheck to paycheck are left holding depreciating cash. The cause and effect here is straightforward and not conspiratorial. Policy choices, market access, timing, and compounding all interact to widen gaps. This doesn't mean there are no practical ways to improve your chance of financial freedom. It means you must be deliberate. Decide which risks you can manage and which you cannot. Diversify your approach across a few assets you understand. Build reliable habits, saving a fixed percentage, reducing avoidable liabilities, learning the language of money. Let's examine common misunderstandings one by one. Misunderstanding 1. Savings in bank equals security. Reality: banks protect nominal balances and provide liquidity. They do not guarantee protection against loss of purchasing power. Misunderstanding 2. Debt is always bad. Reality: debt used to acquire productive assets can magnify returns. Debt for consumption often amplifies decline. Misunderstanding 3. Investing is gambling. Reality: investing is a disciplined allocation of resources across assets with an expectation of return. Gambling depends on odds stacked against you. The difference is preparation, time horizon, and diversification. Behavioral advice is as important as technical advice. Your habits are your financial infrastructure. Automate saving, reduce friction to consistent contributions, and make small early moves easier than big later corrections. Small, repeated correct choices compound powerfully. Finally, think in scenarios and timeframes. A single year of inflation or a single market event is rarely as important as a decade of steady choices. Make decisions that would still make sense if repeated monthly for 5 to 10 years. If you can honestly say yes, you've aligned short-term action with long-term goals. I want to end this voiceover with a clear, calm checklist you can use right now. 1. Measure real purchasing power. Track what you can buy, not just your balance. 2. Create a monthly habit of saving a named percentage for long-term stores of value. 3. Educate yourself about the assets you consider, how they behave when currency changes and why. 4. Reduce or avoid liabilities that erode your future options. 5. Cultivate patience and resist social pressure to equate consumption with success. Wealth is not a single trophy, it's the steady accumulation of choices that preserve and grow real value over time. The principles are simple, but the execution requires attention and time. Final takeaway: changing how you think about money, from chasing nominal numbers to preserving purchasing power, is the first and most important step toward financial resilience. Disclaimer: not financial advice, education only.